Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure Podcast. I'm so glad and happy that you guys decided to join us for another week. We have an awesome episode ahead of us this week where we talk about whiskey, Willie Nelson, what they have in common, Texas country, old school country, and whiskey. I mean, what do they have in common? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get started, I just want a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's sent emails over the past couple of weeks. They've been very encouraging. Sometimes, we're just here behind the microphone and it's just us out here, and we see the stats and we know a lot of people are downloading our podcast every week, and it's been amazing. But we just want to say special thanks to you for taking time and leaving reviews, and also for sending us emails. And those reviews are the lifeline of our podcast. So feel free to leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or just whatever platform that you use. We really appreciate that. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about a company, and they do not sponsor us but Mr. Mike Emerson, who was on our podcast a few episodes ago. I spoke with him. I had a friend of mine who took his son fishing. His friend caught this really nice largemouth bass, and it was just a special father-son bond between the two of them. And I ordered one of the prints from prints.fish. And I'm telling you, it came in the mail. We addressed it to my friend's kid, and he opened it up, and he was just so excited that his print was there, that he could put on a wall, that he will remember that fishing trip with his dad forever. So I just want to say special thanks to Mike Emerson and all that you do at prints.fish and helping people remember those times. It was a very special time. And I'm not saying that because he gave me money or he's sponsoring us. I'm just extremely grateful for that, for what he did and for what he does. So thank you, Mike. Also, we have some great episodes in our back pocket that's coming out here over the next couple weeks that we're so excited about. And also, it's midsummer, everyone's fishing, and it's just a really busy time for everyone who's fly fishing. And what we're looking for at the Remote No Pressure Podcast is great stories. You guys know great stories, great guests, people who would be an excellent guest. And so many of you have emailed me, and that's how we have guests, is because the emails that we get from our listeners. But I just want to say, if you know of a great story or know someone very interesting that we should talk to, please email me, jefft@remotenopressure.com. Message me on our Instagram or our Facebook, because we just want to bring great stories and excellent content to everyone who listens to our podcast every week. This week on the Remote No Pressure Podcast, you guys are going to have a great time as we talk to the author of the Whiskey River Chronicles, Davin Topel, about how he makes whiskey and the stories behind Whiskey River Chronicles and fly fishing. So welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure Podcast, yes, we have another Texan, Mr. Davin Topel. Thank you very much for joining us, Davin.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, Paul Torres, who was recently on our podcast, you had an article about him on your website, Whiskey River Chronicle. Now, I got to ask you this question. The name of your blog is Whiskey River Chronicle. Is that a play on words of
Willie Nelson?
Is that? Yeah, it's late. It's late for me. Is that a play on words of Willie Nelson's song Whiskey River?
It partly is. I'm a big outlaw country fan. I'm a fan of Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, and the new outlaw country, Sturgill Simpson, and Whiskey River just kind of embodied what I do. I'm a fly fishing guide, and I make whiskey, so they just kind of fit together. And it was just something that, and then again, being based in Texas right now, it all just kind of rolled together and seemed right. So that's how I kind of chose the name.
That's really awesome. Now let me ask you, I don't mean to put you on the spot. What is your favorite Willie Nelson album?
Probably it's Shotgun Willie. I'm an old nostalgic guy, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm a big fan. My first time, you see, I think it's really good that you use Whiskey River Chronicle as the name. and we will continue to pound that name throughout the interview, just so everybody knows what the name of your blog is. But I'm not doing that to promote your blog. I'm just saying it's brilliant because here's the deal. Okay, with I remember I grew up in Texas. I'm from Houston, and
Yeah.
I grew up listening to Willie Nelson. I hated him. I hated his voice. People like Robert Earl Keen, who's like, you're so nasally. Growing up, I was like, oh, this is disgusting. Give me some more Hootie and the Blowfish. But then, but then I had my first real heartbreak, and I put in Redheaded Stranger, and from then on, it was game on. I'm like, holy crap. I freaking love Willie Nelson, or I love Robert L. Keane. I love all these awesome old school country guys. And I would also say the first time I tried whiskey, I was like, what is this garbage? And the more you are exposed to it, the better it gets. Am I right?
Yeah. I have to agree on both accounts. When I was growing up, I was a hippie. I grew up. I graduated in 2000, and I listened to a lot of the Grateful Dead, and I still do. And country to me was not my forte. But that was kind of before. Those are the days of when pop country started to come up, and that's all I had heard. And then I didn't start listening to outlaw country until way later in age, and I just then realized what country actually was. It's not Don't Rock the Jukebox and Achy Breaky Heart. It's it's the same thing that my people that I was liking at the time were singing about: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I found it very relatable. Like, oh, so this is okay. That's real country. And ever since then, I've just kind of it's been my favorite genre of music for quite a while now, and it was the same kind of thing. Waylon Jennings is kind of a big. I'm a big fan of Waylon Jennings, and when we moved to Texas, it was a funny story. We were driving through Littlefield, and we moved to Texas from Utah, my wife and I, and we were driving through to get to Austin, where we live now. And on the way, you go through Littlefield, and we were just driving down the freeway, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to put on my favorite Waylon song, which is Way More Blues. And I swear, this is no joke. As soon as it just started playing, we passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Littlefield, home of Waylon Jennings." And I just about dropped. I was like, are you kidding me? That's insane. Like the moment that I decided to put that song on, we're driving into Littlefield, home of Willie Jennings, and I was like, babe, we're stopping. We're pitching camp here. We're stopping here. We're gonna get a hotel. I got to stop by, see if we can find Waymore liquor store. Was the old gas station, but so we got to the hotel, and I asked the front desk, is that still around? And, oh, yeah. And his brother still runs it. If you go up there now, he's probably sitting up there now. And no joke, we went up there, and, it was almost 10 o'clock. They were about to close. And so I was just buying a quick 6-pack of beer just to introduce myself. And
sure.
So I did. I was like, hey, I'm not just here for the beer. I came here, because I'm a big fan of your brothers, and James, his brother, kind of perks up. I think he's in his late 70s, and he just kind of perks up. He's like, really? Oh yeah, and we just started talking, and turns out he's like, well, follow me. Again, they're shutting down shop, and he's like, follow me. And he's got the storefront turned into a Waylon Jennings museum, like everything Waylon Jennings, and it's just and he doesn't really let anybody in there. It's his own personal kind of collection and museum and things, and we talked for probably an hour and a half or something in that museum. It was neat, and really wasn't sure about Texas, but after that, it was like, yep, I'm in the right spot.
Well, what a great story. I mean, holy cow, here you are in Texas talking to Waylon Jennings' brother, and he's giving you a personal tour of his own Waylon Jennings museum. What did your wife think about all this?
She, God bless her. She goes along with it. She's not exactly sure what it is I'm doing. But she and I met on the river. She's a river guide herself. That's where we met, was on the Yampa River in Utah. And so she understands like the whole I got to be outside aspect of it. And but yeah, she likes it enough, but at the same time, I can tell she doesn't really get it. She gets the outside aspect of it, but everything else is kind of like, okay, go have fun, go write your stories.
Well, that's great. So I got a couple questions for you. Now you are the lead brewer. Well, you're not really a brewer. You're a distiller, right? That's how you say it.
Yeah, so I'm the head distiller at Real Spirits Distilling Company, which is it's a sister company to Real Ale Brewing Company in Blanco, Texas.
Okay.
And yeah, we make whiskey and gin from the beer styles that Real Ale Brewing has been making for they've been around for 23 years. It's the second oldest brewery in Texas. And so the owner really he's always wanted to make whiskey, but he, just developed himself into the brewing world so much that he just never had time to explore it up until now. And so we started making whiskey 2 years ago in 2000. Well, I mean, it was 2015 when they actually started making like the permitting and all that kind of stuff in the still. But we didn't actually open or start selling the whiskey until 2017.
Now, did you have any experience with making whiskey before you went there, or how did how did you learn this craft?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of a funny story. So my dad, I'm originally from Minnesota, and I was back home visiting my family, and my dad started brewing beer, and so we started talking, and drinking beer and having some whiskey, and we just kind of like got on the subject of, I wonder how hard it is to make whiskey. So I went home. I was living in Utah at the time, Park City, Utah, and I was living on the backside of Deer Valley in a place called Brighton Estates. It's snowmobiling only in the winter, and so I went back home and just kind of did a bunch of research, and I literally just kind of went into a rabbit hole. And I started researching it more and more, and the distillery High West came into town, and I pretty much went over there and told them what I knew about the distilling industry, and the owner really liked, or the head distiller there at the time liked what I had to say, so I started working for them, making vodka, whiskey for them. And so I was working as a distiller for High West for 2 years, and then my wife and I got pregnant, and we decided to move closer to family, and Minnesota's way too cold for my Texas wife. So we decided to move down to Texas, and I was, to be honest, really scared about moving to Texas because I had gotten really into fly fishing and, the lifestyle of, we were, again, river guides, rafting, and I had done all this, outdoor activities as jobs as well as bartending and what have you. But so I was worried about moving to Texas because I thought that was kind of it for my fly fishing. And lo and behold, come to find out, Texas actually is a pretty neat place to be fly fishing, just because of the different species that are out there that your target species are. And lo and behold, they have trout. And
Wow.
Texas isn't going to have trout. So it really has, it really had everything, and then some. So 4 hours away from Austin, you've got the Gulf Coast. So I got into red fishing, and really looking forward to trying to see if the legends of the Texas tarpon are true.
There are some legends, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I've only been here for about 4 years, but again, I mean, it took us 12 years to explore all of Utah. I don't think we could explore and fish all of Texas in a lifetime. So I'm really looking forward to learning this state more and more as it goes on. But anyway, back to the distilling. So we moved here, and it took me about 2 years to get back in the industry. I was applying for jobs as soon as we left, and the job pool just wasn't really open yet. So there were a bunch of distilleries here, but they already had people, in those positions and things. So as I started putting in applications, I had to get a job. So I was working in my own personal hell. I was behind a computer for 8 hours doing employee placement or hotel placements for employees of other companies. It was a temporary housing company that I worked for. And so for 2 years I did that until finally one distillery calls me, then two distilleries, and three. It was just like when it rains, it pours. And so I ended up, going to a few interviews, and I got to choose which company I kind of wanted to work for. And the one I wanted to work for was Real Ale Brewing. So yeah, it's a great company to work for. It's still mom and pop owned, very, very against big corporation and being bought out. And they allow me to have pretty full creative control. So I couldn't ask for, to be in a better distilling position. Typically distilleries, they have an idea and you need to make this, and that's your worker bee and you go. Over here, it's, what, we like your ideas, and it's just a neat environment and great people to work for.
It sounds like a dream job, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it really, I turned a hobby into a job, which, and it's a job. I work 4 10-hour days, which is also, it's great. It's a long work day, but at the same time, I get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, and that kind of opens up the door for me to do some fly fishing. So yeah, it's worked out okay.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Now, what makes a great whiskey?
So what makes a great whiskey? What makes a great whiskey is, where it's made has a lot of influence on how a whiskey comes out. And you have, so all whiskey, I'll start off with this. All whiskey starts off as beer. It's distilled from grain. That's the definition of whiskey. And all beer being made from grain can be turned into whiskey. So thus, Real Ale Brewing makes beer. I make whiskey from their beer styles. And what makes whiskey great is being proud of where you're from and just having your regional or your surroundings or your terroir, fully affect the final flavor of what you have to offer. And Texas has some really ideal. It's got a really ideal climate, temperature, and humidity for aging whiskey. Everything else that you put into it is, your grain mash bills and the wood that you use for the barreling. Those are huge components, but also just where you're at is where you're at in the world is kind of what makes your whiskey your whiskey. But yeah, we're out in the middle of hill country in Texas. So we've got some high humidity, but it's actually in kind of a really good humid, it's in that nice range of humidity, really. You want to have your rick house in a humidity of around 65 to 70%, and the hill country allows that, has that. But then also Texas has what I call a longer growing season. And what I mean by that is heat plays an integral role in the aging process. So as a barrel heats up, what's going on is the whiskey is allowed to go into the grains of the wood, and then as it cools down at night, the barrel will actually contract and push that whiskey out of the grains of the wood. And so with Texas having these high temps or good aging temps throughout the year, we have, like I said, a longer growing season. We have 11 months and 3 weeks of summer here, and then we may have 1 week in January or February where it'll drop down below 46. And if it drops below 46, the whiskey actually goes dormant in that barrel. And that's why the more northern states, it takes a little bit longer for their whiskey to age. But it's also what imparts the flavor to their region. And us having a longer growing season, we have a shorter aging process, and that's what goes into, it influences the flavor of our whiskey or Texas whiskey. So I think just being proud of where you're from and the effects of your region, make a great whiskey because it's yours. It's from that area. No other whiskey is going to taste like that except from another distiller who, if they use the same mash bill and the same barrels and they're in the same region. But for the most part, it's what makes a great whiskey is just being proud of where you're from and using what you got.
What do you think fly fishing and making whiskey, what do they have in common?
What they have in common, to me, is kind of the art of making whiskey. Is very, very much like the art of learning to fly fish. It's a constant learning curve. You can do it your whole life and learn something every day, which is, why I would never call myself a master fly fisherman ever. And it's the same reason why I would never call myself a master distiller ever. It's, maybe one day I might call myself that, but at this point, I don't see that ever happening because as soon as you stop learning, it starts to become boring or, mundane. So, to me, that's, what the common similarities. As far as whiskey and fly fishing together, it's always great to celebrate, a great catch or a great day, and have just like a small sip of a great tasting whiskey. It just kind of puts a cap on a great day on the water. It can help cement some relationships on the water, but if there's too much imbibed, it can also destroy relationships on the water. So everything is, it's taken in moderation is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Sure. Yeah. And it's not uncommon that, the second day at trout camp, you may or may not have a slight headache after a night of sitting by the fire, and just kind of sipping. Yeah. And you don't even realize you're just sitting there talking and having a sip. And you're right. It does bring you pretty close together. We on your blog, Whiskey River Chronicle, which we'll put the link up in all the show notes and everything. What is your goal with that blog? I know you got some great articles. You talk a lot about whiskey, and can you tell us just a little bit about you're already fly fishing, you're already distilling. What made you decide to start the blog? What was your desire in doing that?
I didn't think it was never like something that I thought I would do. First off, whenever I talk to people, if you're a friend of mine and I'm talking to you about whiskey or fly fishing, I'm usually like I'm doing right now, using my hands a lot, and I get really passionate about it. And one of my buddies who kind of, he follows some bloggers and things like that, he's like, man, you should just start writing, about these things, like I've seen you talking to other people and I've heard it, like you should just give it a try writing. And I never thought that I would start writing, but I was like, you know what? All right, let me just give it a try, and whether I post it or not, I'll just try it out. And I kind of like writing. It's, it feels good to get it off. Like my brain is kind of constantly going. And so if I can just kind of ramble it out on the computer or on paper, it actually helps me kind of like, oh, okay, all right, discard that, you have that archived on paper now, or, and yeah, it's just, it was a good release for me, and I never knew that it would be. So after I did a couple articles, and really liked it, I just started kind of going a little bit further, and I've thought about doing a podcast too. I think it's neat. I mean, it's a great way to get, again, these ramblings out of my head. But I've also got 2 kids, a 3-year-old and an 11-month-old, and it does take up a lot of time. So I'm not really looking for anything big out of this. It's just, meet like-minded people, talk with like-minded people. Again, we're new to Austin as of 4 years ago, and through the blog, I've been able to meet some great people that like whiskey or, like fly fishing, and I'm able to go, do these things with those people. And it was a great way for me to, just kind of meet like-minded people. And so, and it's just, it's organically growing. So I enjoy doing it, and I'm not sure where it's going to go from here. I've always got ideas kind of buzzing around in my head, but again, my family life, it comes first, and I love them to death, and we'll see where it goes from here, but got to make sure I take care of that family first.
Yeah, I mean, we have the podcast, we have a blog, which is basically a description of the episodes that we have. And we don't have, like a YouTube channel or anything like that, just because, like you said, it's a lot of work. And I don't think people understand, how much work goes into it. But if you got a wife and a couple of kids, I mean, there's not a lot of time to just really do something, to really do something right and do it well,
Right.
So, but I like your blog. I think it's awesome. I love the name of it. I think you're doing a great job down there. And yeah, we just really appreciate all that you're doing. What is one of the craziest things that's ever happened to you? I mean, you were guiding out in Utah, right? You were an actual guide then, or?
I was a kind of the same thing. What I'm doing here is, except I was just a river guide. Here I'm a fly fishing guide, but they were part-time passions. I always had regular jobs, and but I knew how to row a boat. So whenever a company needed, an extra guide on a trip or something like that, I would definitely go and help them out. And here, I work for Real Fly, same as Paul, and I got that job through a friend who owned it, Brent Hodges, and it basically started off as just, hey, can you help out? Like, yeah, absolutely. I've got these days off. I can help out. And it's still that way. Just again, I can't work a full-time job and then be gone every weekend with the family. Maybe some other place in my life before this, but now it's just, I'll help out when I can, and I love doing it. And again, my wife understands that I need that river time. I can't. Moving to Austin, even though it's not like living in a city, it's still city life to me. So she understands that I need my medicine every other weekend, and it actually so. And then she actually also allows me to do the Devil's trips, which are overnight trips on the Devil's River, and that can be kind of rough, especially on her, just because we're out of cell service, and if something were to happen to the kids or something, she's unable to get a hold of me. But yeah, there's a balance. There's a balance that I have to keep up. But yeah, it's been great.
What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you out on the water, either with a client or with a friend? Or
craziest thing that's ever happened. I mean, I gotta knock on wood. I haven't had too many crazy things, but I mean, probably going down the Yampa River. My wife was rowing at the time, and it was her first time doing this big rapid, and I actually haven't even done it yet. So props to her, but we got hung up on a rapid, and I was in the raft, and I got blown out of the water into this rapid. And I was under for quite a while, and it's not the first time, that it's happened to me. It happened to me in a ducky going down that same river, but the water was extremely high, and I got sideways on a rapid, totally threw me off the ducky, and I was in a roller for, what seems like 5 minutes. But yeah, I was underwater in this roller, just kind of being ping-ponged around until you remember to kind of ball up like you just ball up, and eventually it'll shoot you out. And those are probably the craziest times, is being thrown out of a boat down a, class 5 rapid. It's pretty nuts. But you get back in the boat, and I mean, you're not going to get out there. There's nobody going to come pick you up. So you just got to keep on going. And I mean, they've been great experiences. Everything that any hardship that you've gone through, it's just take it as a learning experience. And yep, I won't go sideways down a rapid again.
That's awesome. Well, if people wanted to get a hold of you or take a look at your blog, where would they go to do that?
So yeah, they could go to it's Whiskey River Chronicle at WordPress, and there is a contact information under the menu. It's got my phone number and some connections through. I'm on Instagram as Whiskey River Chronicle, Facebook as Whiskey River Chronicle, and they can ping me messages through that. Again, through the blog, if anybody's looking for information or bookings on fly fishing trips in the Texas Hill Country or the Devil's River, all of my contact information is in that blog. So definitely give it a check out. And you can see some fishing reports of the fish that Paul and I pull out of the Guadalupe on a regular basis in the winter season, which is also great. As most people are stop fishing in the winter in those more northern states, that's when our fishing season really kicks off. So we've got a great Trout Unlimited chapter down in the Guadalupe that stocks rainbow trout from anywhere from like 19 to 24 inches. This year was the best year that they stocked. It was
Wow.
It was an amazing, it was a pretty epic season this last season. On top of that, then Texas Parks and Wildlife stocks, and those trout are usually anywhere between 10 and 15 inches. So there's a lot of opportunity right there on the Guadalupe, and I'd say 90% of our clients have never fly fished before, and we catch fish for every client pretty much. So
is that a guarantee? Is that a money back guarantee?
I wouldn't give it a money back guarantee because I don't own the company. But if I own my own company, I might give you a bottle of whiskey guarantee. If you don't catch fish, I'll buy your bottle of whiskey.
Yeah.
As long as it's from Real Spirits.
Yeah. I've hired guides before and not caught anything with them, and I feel bad for the guides because I know it's not their fault and they're awesome anglers. It was just a bad day, and so it happens. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But
and that's the thing is sometimes the fish are just turned off, or there's just different conditions. And right now the water's really low, and as the summer's kind of approaches here in Texas, we have tubers that we have to battle against starting in like March, and so we have to get out early, and about midday, or actually mid-morning, they're already out there, and
wow.
The fish just kind of turn off with that many feet and beer cans in the water. So
yeah, that's true. I can imagine. So you're telling me I can fish, because I'm in Michigan now, so I can fish here all the way through the fall, get the whole salmon run and all that, and then head down to Texas and fish with you guys, so I'm not freezing my buns off. And then, cause I do steelhead fishing in the wintertime too, but it's not fun. It's just something that I do. I don't like freezing my tail off, but,
right.
But you have to feed the addiction, you can't just sit around you sit around as long as you can, and come like February, end of February. I always go the end of February and it's too cold, but I go anyways. And, but so I can come down to Texas though, and just fish with you guys in January and February, and we can call it good.
Yeah, and it's not cold. I mean, it's we're in sweatshirts and waders and things like that. The water's about it's about 50 degrees coming out of the dam at that time. So we'll be in waders and things, but it's not like
That's awesome.
Our season kind of kicks off about mid-November, and we're never bundled up like Midwest bundled up. It's usually waders and a sweatshirt and huge fish, and so it works out really well. And then we're fishing all the way through about June. We're still catching trout, and then the water level will start to drop even more, and the temps will kind of get up there, and we'll have some holdover trout. Some really big ones kind of hold over, but we don't want to stress them out. Once that water gets above 70 degrees, or above really 68 degrees, we kind of leave them alone, because we want those trophy trout to hit us again, that next year. So yeah, and like I said, all the way up and through June, we'll catch trout, and then after that, we're on bass season. I should mention, the Devil's trips we only do in the fall and in the spring, just because it gets too hot in the summer, and then in the winter it's too cold at night. It's desert climate. It's great during the day, but then it'll drop down to lower 30s at night, and it's just kind of an uncomfortable trip to do in the winter. But that fall and spring is gorgeous. We got, never really gets above 90 during the day. It's typically around, the mid 80s. And then the nights are about, 65 at night. And the spring spawn is on for those smallmouth and largemouth and Guadalupe bass. So it's a great time to go for sure.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us. We'll put the links up to your website on the show notes, and also the links up on your Instagram and social media sites as well. And we just really thank you very much for hanging out with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jeff. This was really neat.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if you know of a great story or know of someone that we should talk to, please email me at jefft@remotenopressure.com. Check us out on our Facebook, sign up for our mailing list, and until next time, go fishing.